So I'm going to talk about the role of strain imaging in decision making in treating patients with heart failure. So before I say anything, I want to make it very clear that currently we do not have any RCT data or outcome data to show that treating patients according to strain imaging will definitely improve outcomes, and that's why the guidelines do not recommend this. Still, there is a lot of evidence which shows that this could be potentially very useful approach, and that is what I'm going to talk about. So we know that LV contraction is a very complex process. It is multi-dimensional. LV shortens in long axis, thickens in radial direction, and shortens in circumferential direction also. So all this makes it a very complex deformation. Now LVEF is not able to capture different elements of this contraction, and it shows abnormality only when it is involving all the different components and there is significant LV dysfunction. But strain imaging can detect it much earlier because these different components of LV contraction are governed by different layers of muscle fibers, and abnormality in one muscle fiber can be compensated for by increased contraction of the other muscle fibers. So, strain imaging by looking at these different muscle fibers and showing different components of myocardial dysfunction can detect LV dysfunction before it appears in the form of drop in LVM. Now we need to also remember that because the fibers which are there in the subendocardium are arranged more in aligned to the long axis of the LV, most of the diseases cause impairment of longitudinal contraction first, and that's why GLS becomes a very important modality for detecting early myocardial dysfunction. So what is strain? The strain is nothing but percentage change in the length of the myocardium. So if the myocardium shortens by 20%, we say that strain is minus 20%. If it is increasing by 20%, we say that it is plus 20%. So for GLS estimation, we just need 3 grayscale images, conventional 4 chamber, 2 chamber, and 3 chamber. That is it. With these conventional images, we can quickly do GLS estimation and get a value like this, minus 15% here, which tells us about the overall LV long axis contraction. Now the value around 18 to 20% is considered normal, less negative than that is abnormal. Now the greatest advantages of GLS are, number one, that it is quite reproducible. It is more reproducible than even LVEF, that is one. Second, I told you that it allows us to detect LV dysfunction before it manifests in the form of drop in LVM. And third, extremely important is that GLS is very tightly linked to prognosis. Regardless of the disease entity that we might be looking at, if GLS is reduced, prognosis is worse. Now with this background, let us just quickly look at its role in heart failure patients. So there are many studies which have shown prognostic utility of GLS in heart failure. I will not go into too many studies, just one study I would like to highlight. This one study was reported from Korea. Here, the investigators looked at more than 4,000 patients who had been admitted there with acute heart failure. Their mean LVF was 40%, mean GLS was 10%. The patients were divided into 3 groups based on EF and based on GLS, and they were followed for 5 years for all-cause mortality. Over 5 years, roughly 40% patients died. Now, what we find here is that when we look at the groups according to LVEF, there was not much separation. But if we look at groups according to GLS, there is clear separation with patients whose GLS was in the lowest tertile, they had the worst outcome. And this differential utility of GLS was seen across EF ranges, whether it is HFpEF or mildly reduced EF or HFrEF. In all these categories, we found significant prognostic benefit of GLS. And when we compare EF and GLS, you can easily see that as the GLS is going down, mortality is increasing, but with EF, it is rather constant. So drop in EF in these patients was not associated much with mortality, but drop in GLS was. Okay. Now this study looked at prognosis only. We cannot make any therapeutic decision making based on this, but similar prognostic utility has been shown in many other studies, and I will just discuss some of them. So here we have patients who study in patients who were receiving cancer chemotherapy. Now, out of 159 patients, 52 patients had a drop in GLS of more than 11%, which is considered significant. 24 of these patients were receiving beta blockers, 28 were not receiving beta blockers. This is an observational study, not a randomized controlled trial. But patients who were being treated with beta blocker, they had an improvement in EF when as the duration progressed. But patients who were not being treated with beta blocker, they had continued fall in EF. Same was seen with GLS also. Patients who were treated with beta blockers, they had significant rise in GLS after the initial drop. So I am an example here. The 45-year-old lady, case of invasive ductal carcinoma of breast, no other comorbidities. She was started Herceptin. She had previously received epirubicin. Baseline echo, EF 60%, GLS excellent, minus 22%. 3 months after treatment, LVF is same, no change. But there's almost 17% reduction in her strain from 22 to 18.7. So looking at this 17%, 16% reduction, we put the patient on beta blocker. And then after few months, EF is same, but GLS is improved. And 1 year after completion of therapy, GLS is absolutely normal. EF remained normal throughout the course of this disease. So if we had been looking only at LVF, we would not have picked this early myocardial dysfunction which this patient had developed. And because we added beta blocker, most likely that helped her recover her LV function. Now there are many studies which have looked at this, but there is only one RCT. In fact, only one RCT looking at utility of strain imaging in any disease, and this is this Sukur study published from Australia, Tom Marwick's group. So here they looked at patients with CA breast or lymphomas, blood cancers basically, wide variety, and half of the group was treated according to EF measurements and half according to GLS measurements. So patients who had received treatment based on GLS measurements, they were more likely to recover their LVF after initial drop as compared to patients who were treated according to EF. So when EF dropped, if they were put on beta blocker ACE inhibitor, 65% still had drop in EF. Although overall change in EF was not that much because the cardiotoxicity did not occur in that many patients in this study, so it ended up being an underpowered study. But numerically, there were indications that strain imaging guided treatment was better. And these studies and other studies are the reasons why guidelines recommend use of strain imaging for monitoring treatment in patients who are receiving cancer chemotherapy. Now, other scenario is patients who are undergoing CRT. Now, we know that we don't use echo for selecting patients for CRT, but there could be another application here. So, in this example, we are looking at radial strain, and you can see these different curves showing strain from different myocardial segments. We can see the peaks occurring at different times. So, by looking at these peaks, we can make out which segment is contracting last. That is one. Second, if the radial strain is less than 10%, it indicates that this particular segment is scarred, not going to recover. So by looking at radial strain, we can make out which segment is scarred or not scarred and which segment is contracting last. Using this information, 2 randomized studies have tried to figure out whether this can help placing leads in patients who are undergoing CRT. So one of them is target study, and in this study, patients were in one arm they were treated as per the convention, and in the other arm they were treated according to the echo data. And the electrophysiologist tried to implant lead closest to the site of latest activation without scarring. Now, obviously, it was not always possible to position the lead at the desired site, but it was found that when the lead could be placed next to the segment that was the target segment, the event rates were lowest. And by event rates, I'm talking about all-cause mortality also, very hard endpoint, and death plus heart failure hospitalization, both were significantly reduced if the lead could be positioned close to the site of latest activation without scarring. Then another application in LV dysfunction could be in prediction of sudden cardiac death and the need for ICD. We know electrical heterogeneity is a very important risk factor for ventricular tachyarrhythmias, but strain studies have shown that even mechanical heterogeneity or mechanical dispersion can also be a predictor. So here what we do is we look at different peaks of strain of all these segments, measure time to these peaks and take the standard deviation. If this standard deviation is more than 70 milliseconds, there is very high risk of ventricular tachyarrhythmias, which may be in the form of ICD detected shock, ICD delivered shocks, or ICD detected arrhythmias, or even sudden cardiac death. So this could be one way of using strain imaging in deciding about the need for AICD. So there are large studies, 1,000 patient studies showing the same thing, that if there is mechanical dispersion, high risk of ventricular arrhythmias or appropriate ICD shock. So here we have an example. Patient has had inferior wall MI, EF is around 40-45%. Inferior wall is akinetic, as we can see. So by EF criteria, this patient is not a candidate for ICD. But if you look at his strain map, we find that he's got significant mechanical heterogeneity, as all the different segments are peaking at different time, and standard deviation of all the time to peak was 70, which was significant. So even though we don't have any data, randomized data to support ICD use in this patient, but we need to be aware that this patient is at high risk of having ventricular arrhythmia and arrhythmic death. Another application of strain in heart failure is diagnosis of HFpEF. HFpEF, as we know, is a very difficult entity to diagnose, and although it was earlier believed to be a disease dominated by diastolic dysfunction, we now know that almost half of all patients with HFpEF have reduced LV strain, indicating myocardial systolic dysfunction. And that's why GLS less than 16% is included as one of the parameters for diagnosis of HFpEF. Now, if we go back to the same study which I showed you just now from Korea, it has provided a very interesting insight into the response of these patients to various therapies. So, as I mentioned, there were more than 4,000 patients. Of these, nearly 2,000 had EF more than 40%. So, when they were looked at, in these patients, they were divided into two groups, GLS more than 14% and less than 14%. The investigators looked at who were on beta blocker and who were not on beta blocker. So among patients who had reduced GLS, when they were treated with beta blocker, the mortality was significantly reduced. Now this is very important. In these patients, when EF is above 40%, currently there is no recommendation for routine use of beta blockers. But this study suggested that if we are using beta blocker for some other indication, maybe even for CAD or hypertension, then the patients with reduced GLS are likely to benefit. So this could be one indication where we could be using strain imaging for decision making regarding therapy. Now lastly, very briefly I'll talk about stage B heart failure, which is another entity which is being increasingly recognized now. Stage B heart failure refers to a condition where there is structural heart disease but no symptomatic heart failure. So patient could be having LVH, could be having L enlargement, LV diastolic dysfunction, but symptoms are not there. So now many studies are there which have shown utility of strain imaging here. This one study is from, again, Dr. Tomalik's group, a community-based study, 447 patients. They were diagnosed as having stage B heart failure based on conventional echo criteria. So out of 447, 306 had stage B heart failure. Now, among these patients, those who had normal GLS, in them the event rates were much less. These blue indicate patients who had events. As compared to the patients who had significantly reduced GLS, in them the event rates were much higher. So that means including strain imaging or stage B heart failure characterization improves the diagnostic accuracy and prognostic accuracy also. Now, based on this data, he then conducted a randomized trial in 618 asymptomatic community-based patients. So here they divided the patient into two groups. They did echo, In one group, they conveyed their findings to the treating physician and told them that, look, this patient has reduced strain, has got stage B heart failure, should be treated with ACE inhibitor and beta blocker. Now, in this study, when the patients were followed up for 13 plus minus 6 months, there was no difference in the endpoints between the two arms, because even though the investigators communicated to the physicians about their findings and encouraged them to use the therapies, most of the patients were not initiated on this therapy, only 43%, and in only 9% the target dose was achieved. Because of this reason, the benefit was not found. But otherwise, among patients who received proper therapy, there was a 77% lower hazard for the primary outcome when the treatment was initiated according to the strain finding. So just to summarize, strain imaging provides very valuable information about myocardial dysfunction, which is not captured in LVEF. And this additional information has significant diagnostic utility. It has immense prognostic value and may also help guide therapeutic decision making in these patients. Although RCT data is currently lacking in this field. Thank you so much.